The bullet whistled just a few centimeters from my face. I fell onto the dirty floor of the abandoned warehouse, instinctively covering my head with my hands. The ringing in my ears drowned out the shouts of the police bursting into the building. Through the haze of terror, I saw Lee Do Hyun collapse beside me, clutching his bleeding shoulder. The man I had fallen in love with. The man I was supposed to expose as a murderer. Mi Rae. He shouted through the pain, trying to reach me with his uninjured arm. And just 3 months ago, I didn't even know his name. My name is Kang Mi Rae. From the outside, I might look like an ordinary law student, striving for success, cramming textbooks for hours, drinking liters of coffee at night, and faithfully believing in the power of law and the triumph of justice. In my first year, I looked at the world with wide-open eyes. It seemed to me that all problems could be solved if one simply followed instructions, rules, and codes. I burned with the dream of becoming a judge, believing I could impartially administer justice, punish the guilty, and protect the weak. For me, there were no shades of gray, only black and white, good and evil. That day, I was rushing to a lecture on criminal law. It was one of my favorite subjects, since we studied how the law was applied in court, how evidence was built, how the prosecution was structured. I absorbed everything greedily, hoping to apply it in the future. It was the second semester of my 4th year, and I had already begun to seriously consider where I would go for my internship to gain real experience. At the university, we had connections with the prosecution, the courts, and law firms. My choice was obvious. I wanted to intern with Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji, the strictest and most principled representative of the law, about whom legends were told. She almost never lost cases, and her professionalism and toughness filled many with awe. If only I could become like her, I thought back then. At that moment, I didn't know how quickly I would have to grow up and reconsider my ideas about honor and justice. I didn't yet know that I would soon find myself at the center of a case that would turn my world upside down. It all began the day I first heard the name Lee Do Hyun in the corridors of the university in an unusual context. Until then, it appeared only in crime news, the devil's advocate, defending rapists and thieves, the expensive lawyer of rich and dangerous clients. All that seemed distant, mere headlines on websites. The university remained a quiet, almost sterile island of theory, where real court cases existed only in textbooks. And that day, as I hurried to class right before the lecture began, I overheard several classmates whispering in barely concealed horror, "So what do we do? He's being defended by Lee Do Hyun. I heard he'll definitely get that bastard off." Back then, I didn't think much of it, only noting to myself that the name had reappeared in my life. Even then, a thought flickered in the depths of my soul: what if I had to face someone like him in court? Could I stand against such people? But the lecture began, and, as always, I immersed myself in articles of the criminal code and discussions of precedents and case law. Until evening, I thought of nothing else. A few days later, our university organized a student party, a rare chance to relax and forget about tests, exams, and internships. Normally, I didn't like such events, thinking they were a waste of time. But that time, my friend persuaded me to go. "Mi Rae, come on, at least once a semester you can allow yourself this. You need to relax somehow." I agreed, hoping to distract myself. The party was held in a trendy bar near campus. The space was cramped, the music blaring, but the atmosphere was pleasant. Laughter everywhere, jokes, someone dancing on the improvised dance floor. I stood quietly at the bar with a non-alcoholic cocktail, watching people. I always found it more interesting to observe behavior than to join in. At some point, I stepped outside to get some fresh air. The street was lit by sparse lamps, the sidewalk nearly empty. The cool wind brushed my cheeks. I took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air. And then I heard a scream. From around the corner came muffled sounds of a struggle and a voice full of terror. My heart clenched. Someone's being mugged or attacked. Without thinking, I ran toward the sound. In a small alley, something truly frightening was happening. A drunk man had jumped on a passerby, swearing loudly and demanding money. The victim tried to resist, but the strength was clearly unequal. A rush of adrenaline shot through me. I wasn't a fighter and had no special skills, but the thought that the criminal might go unpunished pushed me forward. I shouted, "Hey! Leave him alone!" And, hardly believing my own recklessness, grabbed a metal rod from the ground to at least scare the attacker. He turned toward my voice, shoved his victim aside, and advanced on me. Rage and drunken madness burned in his eyes. My heart pounded like crazy. My hands trembled slightly, but I tried to stand firm. I knew that even if I was beaten now, I couldn't back down. That would betray all my beliefs. "Get lost, girl," he yelled, "or you'll regret it." But I couldn't. Instead, I stepped forward, swinging the rod clumsily. A metallic clang rang out as he easily knocked it from my hand. Everything happened so quickly and sharply that I didn't understand how I ended up with my back against the wall. The attacker pinned me to the cold stone, and I felt his heavy breath. For a second, I thought this was the end. I couldn't break free, and there was no one around to help. But suddenly, the man was thrown back, as if by an invisible force. I saw someone punch him in the jaw, sending him sprawling. A figure in a long coat bent over him. In the dim light, I could only make out his silhouette, but I noticed the confident movements and the strange, cold decisiveness. It seemed this stranger knew exactly what he was doing. Within seconds, he had subdued the drunk, twisting his arms and pressing his face to the ground. I stood frozen against the wall, speechless. I had been saved. I heard my own racing heartbeat, and one thought pounded in my head: is it really over? The stranger lingered briefly, as if to make sure I was safe, and, without a word, disappeared into the shadows, blending into the night. Breathing in relief, I bent toward the injured passerby. He was bruised but able to stand, and after thanking me, staggered away. As for the attacker, I called the police and waited until they took him away. They questioned me briefly. What happened? How did he attack you? Were you able to fight back? Who was the man who helped you? I only shrugged, unable to answer. In all the chaos, I hadn't understood who my savior was. That night, I struggled to fall asleep, replaying that strange, determined gaze in my mind. But I was certain I would never see that mysterious stranger again. And I was wrong. Soon, my little professional miracle happened. I was invited to intern with prosecutor Han Yoon-ji. She had been looking for young and capable interns, and the dean had recommended several candidates, including me. When the prosecution office called, I could barely contain my excitement. It was my first real step toward my dream, to become a judge. Of course, the road was still long and difficult, but an internship with a famous prosecutor, what could be better? On the very first day, I realized they would demand the maximum from me. Han Yoon-ji was even harsher than I had imagined. A tall woman with a piercing gaze and hair neatly tied into a bun, she spoke little, but every word carried authority and strength. She disliked idle chatter, demanded reports, punctuality, and diligence. I liked that. I was a perfectionist myself, striving for discipline. I tried to show that I could be an efficient assistant, completing every task precisely and on time, double-checking every article I used in reports. Sometimes I stayed in the office late into the night, just so as not to disappoint Han Yoon-ji. I wanted her to see me as a future professional, not just a girl running errands. Time passed, and one day, just as I had grown used to the frantic rhythm of work, Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji unexpectedly summoned me to her office. Her voice over the phone sounded tense. "Mi Rae, come to my office. We need to talk." In the office, lit by the cold glow of fluorescent lamps, she sat at her desk, bent over a folder. Noticing me, she leaned back in her chair and gestured for me to sit opposite her. "How is the work going? Are you managing everything?" "Yes, ma'am. I try to finish tasks on time," I replied, mastering my nerves. "I know, I see that. That's why I called you. I want to entrust you with a delicate assignment. But first, I'll explain what it's about." She opened the folder, revealing photographs, some black and white, some in color. Pictures of people who embodied the darkest side of society, serial rapists, corrupt officials, criminals who had walked free. Some had been acquitted, some had disappeared before trial. But strangely, these people were later found dead. Some killed in their own apartments, some found in rivers. And all within the past few years. What does all this mean? I asked, swallowing a lump in my throat. It means there's a vigilante in the city. The prosecutor looked at me as if gauging my reaction. And we suspect that one lawyer is connected to this. You've probably heard of Lee Do Hyun? I froze. Of course I had heard. But why? You think it's him? I asked in surprise. We don't have direct evidence, Han Yoon-ji admitted. But we do have circumstantial proof that links him to these deaths. First, he defends devilish criminals, and they easily escape punishment. And then, sometime later, someone begins methodically killing them. As if cleaning the streets of the filth that slips away from the law. But why would a lawyer eliminate his own clients? I couldn't wrap my head around it. Good question, Mi Rae. Maybe he takes huge sums of money, gets his clients acquitted, and then settles scores with them. Or maybe it's not him at all. But the prosecution is convinced of his involvement. Her voice grew more insistent. The problem is, he's clever and well-connected. We can't move on him directly. We need more information, real evidence. And what can I do? I asked, feeling a spark of excitement inside me, a chance to prove that I was worth something. You're young, attractive, and still unknown in the legal world. We need you to get close to Do Hyun and, so to speak, work undercover. You'll have to find out whether he's truly involved in these murders. Because if it's true, then he's a ruthless killer, and no lawyer's badge will protect him. My heart pounded heavily. Such a serious mission, to spy on one of the most influential and dangerous lawyers. It both terrified and thrilled me. Inside, emotions clashed, my hunger for justice, my ambition, and my fear. But the thought that I might help catch a true criminal, or clear him of false accusations, if innocent, tipped the scales. I'll do it, I said quietly but firmly. Han Yoon-ji nodded. Excellent. Act cautiously, don't reveal yourself. But I need constant updates. And remember, this mission is unofficial. No one except me and a couple of people in the prosecution should know you're working for us. Understood? I nodded silently. That's how my dangerous game began. And so, just a few days after that conversation with the prosecutor, I encountered Lee Do Hyun in person for the first time. And how surprised I was when I realized who he really was. I went to the courthouse to deliver some documents on behalf of the prosecution. As an intern, I had to handle small errands, and this gave me a pretext to spend more time around professional lawyers. The courthouse was bustling, lawyers rushing back and forth, reporters chasing high-profile figures, guards keeping order. And then, as I stepped toward the water cooler, I saw him from afar, tall, in a perfectly tailored suit, carrying a strict leather briefcase. His black hair neatly styled, his face sharp, his lips thin, and his eyes cold as steel. Around him seemed to radiate a field of tension, forcing people to step aside. I knew instantly it was him, the devil's advocate. And my heart twisted when I remembered the alley that night. Of course, it had been dark, the figure cloaked. It must have been a coincidence, I told myself, trying to still my trembling. But deep inside, my subconscious whispered, it's him. I followed him, pretending to be just another passerby, though I was shaking with nerves. I wanted to know if he really was the man who had saved me. But I also remembered my mission from Han Yoon-ji, to establish contact, to find out who he was, and whether there was any truth behind the rumors. My plan for striking up a conversation was clumsy at best. I accidentally dropped a folder of papers in front of him. He stopped, raising a brow as he saw me awkwardly trying to gather them. May I help you? He asked, his voice softer than I expected from such a dangerous man. Thank you. I'm so clumsy, I stammered. As he helped me collect the papers, our eyes met. I could have sworn that for a moment something like recognition flickered in his gaze. I don't know if he remembered me from the alley or not, but I felt as though I had already been exposed. You weren't hurt, were you? He asked, handing me the last sheet. No, I'm fine. I blinked in surprise. Thank you. He smiled faintly, glanced at his expensive watch, and seemed about to leave when I found the courage. You're Lee Do Hyun, right? The famous lawyer? He looked at me appraisingly. Yes, that's me. Are you here to hire me? A trace of mockery glinted in his eyes. No. I cleared my throat. I'm a law student. My name is Kang Mi Rae. I'm interning at the prosecutor's office right now. I just wondered how you achieved such success. My cheeks flushed. I was terrible at lying on the fly, and the words tumbled out awkwardly. But to my relief, Lee Do Hyun didn't press for details. He seemed used to people's curiosity. Fate, he replied shortly. And hard work. If you plan to become a prosecutor, we might meet again in court. Then you'll see everything with your own eyes. And without saying goodbye, he walked off down the corridor, disappearing into the crowd. I was left with a strange emptiness and a million questions swirling in my head. That was our first somewhat conscious contact. And inside me, something shifted. Because he hadn't shown a hint of the cold cruelty I expected from the devil's advocate. His voice carried calm confidence, and in his eyes there was pain, mixed with contempt. But for what, or for whom, was that contempt? In the following days, I delved deeper into the cases of the disappearances of acquitted criminals. Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji let me review some of the files, and I was horrified by the brutality of the killings. Some were shot, some poisoned, others killed in what looked like accidents. But the common thread was undeniable. All the victims were either former clients of Lee Do Hyun or people tied to major corruption schemes he had once defended. Keeping in touch with Han Yoon-ji, I tried to grasp the logic behind the Avengers' actions. Each time a criminal walked free despite logic and obvious evidence, soon enough the newspapers would flash with headlines, "Body found." Police report signs of violent death. I couldn't get used to the thought that this might be Do Hyun himself. The image of that calm man in the courthouse simply didn't fit with that of a ruthless executioner. Meanwhile, a chance arose to meet him again, this time at a pretrial conference for a case Han Yoon-ji was leading. She was determined to bring down a well-known businessman exposed in corruption. And, as luck or misfortune would have it, his defense attorney was Lee Do Hyun. The day before the hearing, Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji summoned me. Your task is to try to establish a more trusting contact with him. Find out how he lives, where he goes, whether he has any unusual acquaintances. Be careful. And remember, your goal is to uncover the truth, not to get caught. I was nervous. What should I say to Lee Do Hyun? How could I approach him? He already looked at me with suspicion. But fate had its own plans. The next day, during the lunch break at court, I overheard that Lee Do Hyun disliked public cafeterias and preferred to retreat to a nearby coffee shop. Here's my chance, I thought, mustering up my courage and heading there. And indeed, at one of the tables sat that familiar figure, a strict suit, a relaxed posture, surrounded by an aura of untouchability. He was sipping coffee, staring at something on his phone. I approached, my heart skipping a beat. "Hello, Mr. Lee. May I join you?" He lifted his gaze, and for a second I caught a flicker of surprise, or maybe amusement, on his face. Of course, Kang Mi Rae, isn't it? I exhaled in relief. He remembered my name. That was already progress. Yes, you have an excellent memory, I tried to smile, forcing confidence. I just wanted to thank you for your career advice. And perhaps ask a few questions about being a lawyer? He nodded, putting his phone aside. Go ahead. We talked about jurisprudence, about how hard it was not to break morally in a profession where every day you faced lies and greed. And then Lee Do Hyun said something that stunned me: the law is a game. And the winner is the one who knows the rules better than anyone. Believe me, Kang Mi Rae, there is no justice, only a system you can either cheat or use. I tensed at his cynical words. Inside, everything in me protested. How can one see the law like that? Isn't it the foundation of society? But at the same time, it matched what I'd read about him in articles, his ruthless defense style, his indifference to morality. But you must believe in the law, since you're a lawyer, I objected. I believe in the right outcome for my client, he said coldly. Sometimes what people call justice is nothing more than an illusion. My heart clenched. It was useless to argue. He seemed to have built his own coordinates, higher than everything else. For a moment, I almost pitied him. What was it like to live without dividing the world into good and evil, seeing it only as a field for manipulation? We left the cafe, and he offered to drive me back to court. I agreed, feeling a strange thrill inside, alone in a car with such an ambiguous man. My mission for the prosecution was at the back of my mind, but at that moment curiosity about him prevailed. As we drove, the radio reported that during the night someone had shot a repeat offender, recently released on parole. I glanced at Do Hyun. His face betrayed neither surprise nor sympathy, as if he were completely indifferent. Or perhaps simply very good at hiding emotions. A few days later came an episode that reminded me once more of the mysterious savior in the alley. I had stayed late at the prosecution office, sorting documents for Han Yoon-ji. When I left, I felt as if someone was following me. On the dark street, I saw a shadow flickering behind the corner. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. Maybe just paranoia, yet the sense of danger wouldn't leave. Suddenly, a burly man stepped out of an alleyway. "Girl, got a cigarette?" I shook my head, trying to walk past, but he abruptly grabbed my shoulder. "Wait. You're that intern from the prosecution, aren't you? What are you doing there?" My back went cold. How did he know who I was? I muttered that I had to go, but he wouldn't let me. "Listen, girl, don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji is digging where she shouldn't. Tell her that if she doesn't stop, things will get ugly," he hissed threateningly. I struggled, but his grip was too strong. Thoughts whirled in my head. If something happens, will anyone help me? Again I remembered that night in the alley. And, as if by instinct, salvation came just as suddenly. "Let her go," I heard a low, calm voice behind me. I turned and saw Lee Do Hyun. He emerged from the darkness just as unexpectedly as the mysterious stranger that night. My heart skipped a beat. Could all this be coincidence? Or had he truly been following me? But at that moment I felt only relief. "And who do we have here? A lawyer boy?" The thug sneered, releasing my arm. "Get lost if you don't want trouble." But Lee Do Hyun didn't move. Instead, he stepped forward, giving the man such a calm, piercing look that the thug's mouth twitched nervously. His expression seemed to say, "I don't care who you are. I'll do whatever I deem necessary." I said, "Let her go. Or else." He didn't finish, but the threat was clear. The man swayed on his heels for a second, then muttered, "You'll regret this later," and disappeared into the night. Breathing heavily, I stepped back and looked at Lee Do Hyun. He seemed utterly composed, as though nothing had happened, only the darkness in his eyes had deepened. "You. How did you end up here?" "Passing by, saw a familiar figure," he shrugged. I wanted to ask, "Really?" But the word stuck in my throat. Now I clearly saw something familiar in his gaze, something that brought me back to that first night. And I realized he was most likely the one who had saved me then. But why wouldn't he admit it? "Thank you," I whispered, swallowing hard. "Don't mention it." "Kang Mi Rae, do people harass you often?" he asked with a hint of irony, turning away as if not wanting me to read his face. "No, I shook my head. It's just that my work might put me in the path of some unpleasant people. He gave a crooked smile and pulled out a business card. Take this. If you find yourself in trouble again, call me. I won't always be nearby. I took the card. That was, after all, a step toward establishing contact. He got into his car and drove off, while I stood there, trembling. Who had I seen that first night? Was Lee Do Hyun my mysterious savior, or had I only imagined it? And if he really was capable of such protection, then why the accusations that he was the devil's advocate, killing his own clients? It didn't add up. The more time I spent near Lee Do Hyun's world, the stronger my doubts grew. I saw him in court, at negotiations, in hallways. Though he acted coldly, at times his words carried a depth I couldn't ignore. And I kept asking myself, what if he isn't guilty of what they suspect him of? Yes, he defended criminals. Yes, he did it by exploiting investigative flaws, procedural loopholes, by casting doubt on witnesses' memories with virtuoso skill. But wasn't that his job? Could any lawyer be accused of their client's crimes? And yet, the prosecution insisted that he personally carried out the dirty work, eliminating those who had evaded justice, conducting a one-man crusade against evil. I looked at Lee Do Hyun and tried to picture him meticulously planning a murder, then carrying it out with a stone face. But the image simply wouldn't stick. I began to notice that Prosecutor Han Young-ji was heightening the tension. His name echoed in her office more and more often, and from her tone I understood that she was waiting for something, perhaps a new murder, so she could catch the lawyer at the scene, or some decisive piece of evidence. One evening, I visited Han Young-ji in her office to deliver a report. I gathered my courage to ask a direct question. Madam Prosecutor, are you truly certain that it's Lee Do Hyun who's the avenger? She cast me a heavy glance. Mi Rae, are you starting to doubt? Maybe he's already worked on you too? Be careful, he's a master of psychological pressure, of persuasion and manipulation. No, he hasn't tried to persuade me of anything. But I hesitated, searching for words. I don't think he looks like someone capable of killing. People rarely look like monsters until they do something monstrous, she said, tapping her pen against the desk. Remember, we have reason to believe he's involved. Your task is to uncover the truth. If he's innocent, we need proof of that. And if he's guilty, then all the more we need irrefutable evidence. I don't have time for sentimentality, Mi Rae. I realized the prosecutor viewed the situation from only one side. For her, a lawyer who beat her in court and ruined her indictments was already an enemy. And if he was also a killer, all the worse. I left her office with a heavy heart, feeling caught between a hammer and an anvil. Soon, to my surprise, fate itself provided an opportunity to learn more about Lee Do Hyun's life. One of his acquaintances, Sun Min Jae, a civil lawyer I had run into at a few events, suddenly called me and suggested attending a charity reception at a private club. She said there would be many influential people there, including Lee Do Hyun, and that it could be useful for my career growth. Of course, for my secret mission this was an invaluable chance. I agreed, though inside I trembled with fear that I might give myself away. But I tried to look determined. I can handle this. I must find out the truth. That evening, I arrived at the reception in a modest black dress, classic and without unnecessary embellishment. After all, I was still a poor student, unable to compete with the extravagant outfits of the wealthy guests. Inside, live music played, people moved about with glasses in hand, laughing and tossing around phrases about politics and business. I felt like a stranger here, but did my best to appear confident. I spotted Lee Do Hyun at the bar. He was wearing an elegant tuxedo, exchanging a few words with someone, though he seemed slightly bored. When he noticed me, a flicker of surprise crossed his eyes. Kang Mi Rae? Here too? He asked, giving me a quick once-over. Yes. I was invited by Sun Min Jae. She said useful connections can be made here. He gave a quiet chuckle. For a prosecution intern, that's certainly useful. Or do you want to switch sides and become a defense lawyer? I shrugged. I haven't decided yet. I want to see the legal world from different perspectives. At that moment, Sun Min Jae herself approached, smiling and offering champagne. Do Hyun politely sipped from his glass and then walked off to mingle with some serious-looking people in the corner of the hall. I didn't want to follow him too obviously, so I stayed in the crowd, catching fragments of conversation. Some praised Lee Do Hyun for his brilliant courtroom performances. Others whispered that he was a dangerous type, that he had sold his soul to the devil for big money. I tried not to react, but inside I churned, "Who are you really, Lee Do Hyun?" At some point I stepped onto the terrace to catch my breath. The night air smelled cool, and the music from the hall sounded muffled. To my surprise, I saw Lee Do Hyun standing by the balustrade, staring thoughtfully at the city lights. "Tired of the hall?" I asked uncertainly as I approached. "A little," he replied without turning his head. "The endless talk about profitable deals and contracts. Sometimes it wears you out. I thought you enjoyed these kinds of events, where everything is formal and polished," I said softly. "I used to. Now I see them as just part of the job." There was a note of weariness in his voice. In that moment he seemed to me simply a man tired of constant pretense. The warm wind brushed his hair, and I felt a strange stirring at his nearness. He suddenly spoke, and his words stunned me. "Kang Mi Rae, have you ever wondered why the law doesn't always work the way we want? Why sometimes the innocent end up in prison, while true villains walk free?" "Yes. Of course I've wondered. That's exactly why I want to become a judge, to correct these injustices." He turned and looked me in the eyes. "And what if one day you see that this dream can never come true, that the system is rotten, and there's no chance to fix it? What will you do then?" I faltered. His words seemed to carry some personal pain, as though he had lived through something that made him lose faith in the law. My chest tightened. I wanted to ask what had happened to him, but I didn't dare. I only whispered, "I'll keep fighting." He closed his eyes briefly and gave a faint smile. "Stubborn. Just don't break." For several seconds we stood in silence. I suddenly felt an unfamiliar pull toward him, a trembling inside me just from his presence. I realized I was partly enchanted by his strength, his ability to stay free of others' opinions. At that moment, a waiter approached to offer more drinks, and the atmosphere dissolved. But that short scene on the terrace etched itself in my memory. After the charity reception, my path crossed with Lee Do Hyun's more often. We met in court, sometimes exchanged a few words in the corridors. A couple of times he sent me messages like, "How's your studying going? Need any help?" It left me confused. The very man I was supposed to expose was showing concern. I didn't know how to react. One evening, completely out of the blue, he wrote, "It's my birthday today. I'm inviting you to dinner. Come if you'd like." I was stunned. He was inviting me, a prosecution intern, to his birthday? That couldn't be just a friendly gesture. My heart pounded. On one hand, I knew this was a perfect chance to learn more about him. After all, at a birthday dinner his closest friends and partners would be there. On the other hand, I couldn't deny the forbidden pull I felt toward this man. But could I refuse? I arrived at the restaurant he had chosen, wearing an elegant pastel dress to avoid looking too flashy. Inside, the atmosphere was spacious and calm, not a noisy party, but rather a cozy evening with a few guests. I noticed a couple of his lawyer acquaintances, his secretary, and several people I didn't know. Do Hyun met me at the entrance. I noticed the slight approval in his eyes, and my heart clenched with nervous excitement. At the table, the mood was relaxed. The guest seated to my left kept asking what it was like to be an intern at the prosecutor's office, and whether prosecutors always looked too dry. I laughed, trying not to reveal my tension. When the toasts and chatter quieted down, someone suggested moving to a private room in the restaurant. There was a sofa inside and a small side table with drinks. Guests gradually scattered. Some went to smoke on the balcony, others got into a heated debate about legal reforms. I stepped into the hallway, planning to call a friend, when suddenly I felt Lee Do Hyun behind me. "Aren't you bored?" he asked calmly. "No," I lied. "It's just unusual for me. I don't usually attend such evenings. And I've never been to a birthday like yours." He smiled faintly. "A birthday like mine?" Then he gestured invitingly. "Come on, let's have a glass of wine." We returned to the private room, which was almost empty now. I noticed that the wine was already poured into elegant crystal glasses. He handed me one. When I sipped, I tasted the rich, tart flavor. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly, sitting down next to me on the sofa. "I didn't expect you would agree." "Why did you invite me?" I dared to ask. He looked straight into my eyes, and once again I felt that strange pull, as if an invisible thread stretched between us. "I wanted you to see me as more than the labels people stick on me, you know what I mean. To see me as just a man who sometimes enjoys good wine and good company." His lips curved into a faint smirk. "Although, I admit, I'm not sure how ordinary I really am." My heart pounded in my chest. The evening seemed to be unfolding so that we were left alone, and I felt uncontrollable nervousness. He leaned a little closer, and I caught the scent of his cologne, warm, with bitter undertones. "Kang Mi Rae," he said softly, "for some reason I think you're far more dangerous than you want to appear." "Do you know why?" "Why?" I breathed out. "Because I see in your eyes the same determination I've only seen in people who are ready to cross the line when the time comes." He leaned in, and the space between us shrank to almost nothing. I remembered why I was here, what the prosecutor had assigned me to do, but all of it faded for a moment, because his closeness made my fingertips tremble. "And sometimes I think—" He brushed a strand of my hair with his hand. "You're not such an innocent guardian of the law after all." His words, his voice wrapped around me, disoriented me. I knew he was provoking me, trying to stir feelings that might weaken my guard. But my consciousness was drowning in waves of desire. I was only a young woman, facing a man who radiated magnetism and strength. In that instant, I forgot everything. He leaned down, and our lips met. The kiss was soft yet deep, as if we had both been storing tension, and it finally burst free. I gripped his hand, while he gently pulled me closer, drawing me into that whirlpool of sensation. I don't know how long it lasted, but when I finally pulled away, my heart was pounding as if it would leap from my chest. I was embarrassed, shaken, everything inside me in turmoil. And at the same time, guilt stabbed sharply. How could I give in like that? I'm supposed to watch him, not. He looked at me, and it was clear he cared. But I swallowed hard and stood, trying to regain control. "I'm sorry. I need to go. I should make a call home." He said nothing, only nodded. And I practically ran from the room, pressing my phone to my ear, though I wasn't really calling anyone. I just needed to collect myself, to understand what I was doing. On one hand, my mind screamed, "This is wrong. He's a suspect." On the other, my heart pulled me toward him. The next day, I could hardly look Prosecutor Han Young-ji in the eye, afraid that everything was written on my face, the kiss, my growing attraction to Lee Do Hyun. But she seemed too busy with new details in the case. She had received information that someone in Do Hyun's close circle was suspected by the police of criminal connections. "In the coming days," said the prosecutor, "we'll start working on this man, search his home, check his accounts. If we find anything tying him to the murders, we'll be able to get closer to Do Hyun. Mi Rae, try to learn something from him, since you're now, shall we say, on friendly terms?" I blushed, hoping she didn't suspect just how friendly our terms had become. But I swallowed and nodded. "I'll try." Meanwhile, another strange murder occurred in the city. A former swindler who had escaped justice was found in an abandoned building, a bullet in his heart. The police had no leads, but everyone whispered, "It's the Avenger again." A heavy unease settled in me. Could it really be a coincidence that a serial killer might be operating nearby? And why was everyone so sure it was Do Hyun? I decided to meet him that evening at his office, under the pretense of asking a few questions for my coursework. He agreed, and when I arrived, his secretary led me into a small conference room. Do Hyun entered after what must have been some business negotiations, dressed in a dark suit, looking a bit tired. The secretary brought tea and left us alone. Nervously, I sipped the tea, trying to gather my thoughts. "What questions?" he asked me with a light smile. "Well," I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, "I wanted to talk about. To be honest, about the death of that swindler found the day before yesterday. The police say the evidence is similar to previous cases." He looked at me closely, narrowing his eyes, and, "Did you want to ask me if I did it?" "Yes, I know what people are saying." "No." I raised my hand in protest. "Of course not. With all the talk that you're the one eliminating criminals, it's hard to know whom to believe anymore." He spread his hands. "And what about your faith in the law, Kang Mi Rae? Aren't you supposed to believe in the presumption of innocence?" "I am," I admitted. "But I looked straight into his eyes. "I want to know your truth." He rose from his chair and came closer, a strange light flickering in his gaze. "My truth," he repeated softly. "Do you know the most terrifying thing about the justice system? Sometimes it turns victims into defendants, and the guilty into heroes. Maybe that's why someone decided to take justice into their own hands. But me," he sighed, "I have nothing to do with it. I wanted to ask, why do you always defend the most vile criminals? Why not take on noble cases instead?" But I knew it would be too provocative. And he, it seemed, sensed my unspoken question and answered it himself. "I have my reasons for defending such people. Sometimes," he looked away, "sometimes it means gaining the leverage needed to influence those who secretly control whole layers of corruption. You might think I'm just a cynic who doesn't care about morality. But it's far more complicated than that." My heart clenched. I was sinking deeper into the feeling that he wasn't the monster people thought he was. And doubts tore at me about the righteousness of my mission. But I knew I couldn't stop. Han Yoon-ji was waiting for my report. "You won't kill your own clients, will you?" I asked almost in a whisper. He looked at me with bitterness. "I haven't killed anyone, Mi Rae. If you came here for an answer to that question, then here it is." Suddenly his secretary burst into the room. "Excuse me, there's an urgent call on your personal phone." Do Hyun apologized and left. I was left alone, and in that moment my feelings battled within me. Should I believe him or not? But what I had seen in his eyes seemed too honest to be an act. Weeks passed, and my relationship with Lee Do Hyun grew increasingly complicated. Sometimes we crossed paths, sometimes we avoided each other. But it was clear that between us there was tension, emotional and physical, that couldn't be denied. One evening he called me on my mobile. His voice was tired. "Sorry it's so late." "Are you busy?" "No, I'm just at home, going through study materials," I lied, though in truth I was sifting through reports prosecutor Han Yoon-ji had sent me. "I need someone to talk to. Can you come to my office? It's important." There was such a note of despair in his voice that, though I was wary, I couldn't refuse. I gathered my things and went to him. The office was empty except for a night guard. Do Hyun was sitting alone at his desk, papers spread before him. "What happened?" I asked softly, closing the door behind me. He slowly lifted his gaze to me. "This evening one of my clients took his own life. He left a note accusing me of forcing him into it. They say he confessed to a crime before his death, one I supposedly knew about. The police are already on it. The press will feast on this." "That's bad," I murmured. "Very," he rubbed his eyes. "My reputation, already shaky in the public's eyes, might collapse completely. Do you think Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji will pass up the chance to use this against me?" I knew she wouldn't. She would be thrilled to spin the situation, to pressure him, to expose him as she saw it. I sighed, stepping closer, but if you're innocent, then nothing can prove otherwise, right? He gave a bitter smile. Sometimes that doesn't save you. I'm tired of being a target. I looked at him, and my heart ached with sympathy. He seemed so vulnerable in that moment, stripped of his usual arrogant armor. Almost without thinking, I put my hand on his shoulder. I believe you. He stood, and our eyes met. It seemed he wanted to say thank you, but the words never left his lips. Instead, he pulled me into a tight embrace. I felt the beating of his heart. It was so human, without masks or games. Everything happened quickly. In that silent embrace we forgot everything else. Our lips met again, but this time the kiss was more passionate, charged with the tension and desire we had been holding back. A wave of heat swept over me, flooding every nerve. Mi Rae, he whispered, his hand sliding along my back. I didn't answer, only pressed closer, letting the feelings take over. We moved toward the sofa by the wall, our breaths mingling. The world seemed to vanish around us, only his hands, his lips, his presence mattered. He unbuttoned my jacket carefully, his fingers brushing my shoulders, making me shiver. In my head one thought pulsed, what am I doing? I have no right. But at the same time, my whole body screamed, you want this? I helped him slip off the jacket, my hands running over the firm lines of his chest beneath his shirt. He broke the kiss to look into my eyes. It felt like he, too, was hesitating, knowing we were about to cross a line. But I only caressed his cheek and leaned in again. And we crossed it. In the dim office, in the silence of the night, we gave in to passion, as if seeking answers to our fears and questions in each other. His touch was sometimes gentle, sometimes demanding. His breath seared my skin. I responded with equal fervor, swept up in desire. When his lips traced my collarbone, I barely stifled a moan. Time seemed to stretch into eternity until, when it was over, I lay beside him on the sofa, shaken by what we had done. He held me close, his breathing steady, while inside me raged a storm of happiness, fear, and guilt. I knew there was no turning back. We were no longer just acquaintances on opposite sides of the law. Our souls had touched, and nothing would be the same again. I dressed without meeting his eyes, afraid he would see in mine a confession of love or of weakness. When he walked me to the elevator, we stood in silence until I whispered, I'll call you. All right, he said, not letting go of my hand until the very last second. As the elevator doors closed, I felt myself sinking not only floor by floor but deeper into a pit of contradictions. I had just slept with the man I was supposed to expose. And yet, I couldn't stop feeling for him. After that night, I was no longer myself. Every time Han Yoon-ji called, I grew nervous, wondering if she sensed something. I even avoided speaking about Lee Do Hyun directly, sticking to vague phrases. I'm still working, he hasn't said much yet. But the prosecutor wasn't a fool. She summoned me and fixed me with a look that seemed to scan my very soul. Mi Rae, the case is nearly cracked. We've got new evidence that the killer is someone close to Lee Do Hyun. One more step, and we'll have him by the throat. I want you to help. Inside, everything dropped. Have him by the throat meant sooner or later accusations would fall on him. If he was truly innocent, he'd be framed. Or was he really so clever he had deceived me with feelings? When I rushed out of her office, Do Hyun called me. We need to meet. I'm leaving for a couple of days on business out of town, but I want you to come with me. My heart fluttered, but I tensed. Out of town? For what? It's connected to a client's case. I need to check something. I'd like your company. After some hesitation, I agreed. I told the prosecutor I had family matters, took 2 days off, and left with Do Hyun by car to a small seaside town. The drive was long, and we barely spoke of work. I enjoyed every moment of his presence. He seemed relaxed, telling stories about the town's history, about childhood trips to the coast. I laughed at his memories. For a while, we felt like an ordinary couple, far from Seoul's problems and endless trials. When we arrived, he booked a cozy room in a seaside inn. It felt like we had escaped reality. In the evening, we walked along the shore, listening to the waves, watching the distant lighthouse lights. He took my hand, and I leaned into him, feeling peace. In his arms, the world stopped being black and white. I wanted to believe this was real happiness. But that night I woke to find him leaving the bed and stepping onto the balcony. The cold without his warmth woke me, and I crept quietly to see what was happening. He stood at the railing, phone to his ear, his face tense in the moonlight. He spoke quietly, but I caught a few words. This shouldn't have happened. I'll deal with it. Yes, I understand. My heart pounded. What was this conversation? What was he talking about? Could it be about the murders? I felt like a traitor. I should have confronted him, but instead I lingered, listening. Deep down I knew, this might be my only chance to learn the truth. But almost immediately he noticed me. He turned off the phone and looked back. You're not asleep? I woke up and saw you weren't there. I came closer, trying not to reveal my unease. Is everything all right? He nodded, forcing a smile, though his eyes were tense. I got an unexpected call. Problems in Seoul. But I don't want to ruin our evening with work. Let's go back. I followed him, feeling that he was shutting me out. But I didn't insist. We lay down again, and he held me close. I felt his warmth, but I knew there was a storm inside him that he didn't want to share. When we returned to Seoul, events began to unfold quickly. Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji suddenly gathered the whole team and announced, "We have data showing that the person we suspect of the murders is Lee Do Hyun's close assistant, Park Soo-min. He handled some financial operations but may have also carried out his dirty work. Today we're going in with a search warrant." I felt the ground give way beneath me. She believed that through Park Soo-min she could get to Do Hyun himself. And what if it's true? I wondered. Or is this just a trap to corner him? That evening, when I met Do Hyun, he looked grim. Without even greeting me, he said, "The police searched Park Soo-min's place. He's gone. No one knows where he is. I'm trying to find him, but it's useless. And you? Do you think he's involved in the murders?" I asked, barely breathing. Lee Do Hyun looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. "You think I'm tied to the killings too?" "No," I shook my head, "but if Park Soo-min did commit them, then he's your assistant." He ran his hand through his hair, as if fighting to control his anger. I knew nothing of what he was doing. Maybe he really was taking revenge on those people, but that was his choice, his risk. Maybe he thought he was fixing my work. I have to find him before the police get to me. A sharp urge to protect him welled up in me. But I also realized I was being pulled into a dangerous whirlpool. If Park Soo-min is the avenger, that doesn't prove Do Hyun guilty. But if they work together, then... My mind spun, caught between duty and feelings. That same evening, I went back to my place and reviewed the materials I had gathered. In one document I saw a list of Park Soo-min's phone calls. Among the numbers I recognized one. My heart skipped a beat. It was Do Hyun's number, the one he used when he called that night at the seaside. That meant they were in contact. But of course they were. He was his assistant. I dug up another file about Do Hyun's past cases where Park Soo-min had appeared as a consultant. It turned out he had a tragic past. His sister had been killed by one of the criminals whom Do Hyun had once managed to acquit. Could that be it? Park Soo-min had a personal motive to take revenge on those who escaped justice. I realized this was an important discovery. It meant the motive belonged to the assistant, not to Do Hyun himself. With trembling hands, I flipped through more papers, thinking, most likely the truth is that Park Soo-min punished them on his own, and Do Hyun knew nothing. But suddenly I found a report stating that before each murder, Park Soo-min had met with Do Hyun. And the dates matched exactly. Was Do Hyun directing him? I thought in horror. Or were these just routine work meetings? Everything blurred together. My phone rang, and I heard Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji's voice. Mi Rae, we have information that Park Soo-min is hiding in an old warehouse on the outskirts. We're going to catch him red-handed. Your task is to lure Lee Do Hyun there under some pretext. If he shows up and tries to help his partner escape, that will prove everything. I froze, clutching the phone until my knuckles turned white. Lure him there? But this was a trap. Madam Prosecutor, what if he's innocent? I don't know, Han Yoon-ji cut me off. But we'll find out as soon as he shows up. Hurry. She hung up, leaving me paralyzed. What she asked was nothing less than betrayal. Deep inside, I knew, if Do Hyun was innocent, he could still be caught in a snare. If he was guilty, then all the more so. But did I have a choice? I called Do Hyun and told him I knew where Park Soo-min was. I pretended that Soo-min had called me asking for help. Do Hyun agreed immediately and made me promise to take him there. My hands shook as I drove to the warehouse. A thought flickered, should I warn him it's a setup? But that would mean breaking the law and disobeying orders. The warehouse was dark and damp, the air thick with mold. I stepped inside, using my phone as a flashlight, and soon heard Do Hyun's footsteps behind me. Mi Rae, he called softly, where's Park Soo-min? I led him deeper into the building, where something creaked in the shadows. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, Park Soo-min, his eyes wild, hands trembling. A gun gleamed in one of them. This way. He whispered when he saw us. I knew you'd come. You always came when I was desperate. Soo-min, what are you doing? Do Hyun's voice trembled with tension. Put the gun down. I held my breath. The plan had been to wait until the police moved in, but everything spiraled out of control. Park Soo-min was clearly unstable. He aimed the gun at us. Why did you defend those bastards? They killed my sister. They deserved to die. I couldn't stand to watch them live, laugh, walk free. What does this have to do with me? Do Hyun rasped. You helped them. Freed them. Park Soo-min's voice broke into a scream. I did what you wouldn't. You knew they belonged in hell, but you kept playing by the rules. I became your hands, I executed them. My insides froze. So he really had acted alone, driven by vengeance. Do Hyun wasn't the killer. Yet Park Soo-min believed he had been acting with him. Nonsense. Do Hyun whispered. I never wanted killings. I only defended them to uncover who was behind the corruption. But you ruined everything. Out of the corner of my eye I caught movement. The police were surrounding the warehouse. The raid was about to begin. Park Soo-min must have realized it too. He raised the gun, aiming directly at Do Hyun. You abandoned me, you liar. If it weren't for you, my sister would still be alive. Soo-min, calm down. Do Hyun tried to step forward, but Park Soo-min snapped and pulled the trigger. It all happened in an instant. The gunshot rang out, and I instinctively lunged toward Do Hyun. The bullet hit his shoulder. He collapsed, clutching the wound, and I screamed, dropping to my knees beside him. At that moment, the police burst through the doors, rifles aimed at Park Soo-min. In panic, he tried to fire again, but they overpowered him. I was in shock, watching blood seep through Do Hyun's sleeve. Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji appeared in the doorway, her eyes stern. But when she saw the wounded Do Hyun, it seemed she understood he hadn't attacked, he had become the victim. Call an ambulance! I shouted, pressing the wound to stop the bleeding. The ambulance came, and Do Hyun was rushed to the hospital. I went with him, trembling from what had happened. One thought spun in my head, if I had warned him, he wouldn't have been shot. But then the police would have suspected me of collusion. In the hospital corridor, Prosecutor Han Yoon-ji approached me. Her face was hard. Well, Mi Rae, I was wrong. The culprit is Park Soo-min. He confessed to all the murders. As for Do Hyun, we'll still check if there was any complicity. He's not involved. I burst out. You saw it yourself. We'll see, she answered coldly. In any case, you did your job. Park Soo-min is caught. For today, your mission is over. My chest tightened. Mission over. And what about my feelings for him? Don't they matter? Yes, I was supposed to simply help expose a criminal, but now my life and heart were tied to Lee Do Hyun's. I waited by his room until the doctor came out. He told me Do Hyun was stable, the bullet had passed through, damaging only soft tissue. If no complications arose, he would recover. I sighed with relief. When I was finally allowed inside, I saw him lying under an 4 drip. He was pale, but when he noticed me, he smiled faintly. Mi Rae. I came closer, squeezing his hand, tears of relief streaming down my cheeks. He smiled again, wincing from the pain. I'm glad you weren't hurt. I shook my head, unable to speak. He needed rest. The doctor asked me to leave, and I stroked his hand, promising to return later. Days passed. Park Soo-min confessed to everything. He had murdered those acquitted by Lee Do Hyun, becoming a kind of punisher. He admitted that Do Hyun had known nothing of his actions, and when he did find out, he had tried to stop him, but too late. The scandal erupted in the media. Officially, the police cleared Do Hyun of suspicion, though his reputation was still damaged. As for me, I told prosecutor Han Yoon-ji the truth. Do Hyun was innocent, and Park Soo-min had acted out of personal vengeance. She didn't scold me, only said that for the law, there are no emotions, only facts. My internship ended. I gained invaluable experience, and a broken heart? No. Rather a heart that now saw the world in all its shades. After his recovery, Lee Do Hyun moved his office to another location, away from the noise. We met a week later at his home. He opened the door, leaning on his bandaged arm. Despite his pale face, he smiled. Come in. I stepped into the modest apartment. No signs of the luxury I had imagined the devil's advocate would have. It was practical, even a little empty, as if reflecting the loneliness of its owner. I helped him settle into the living room. How are you feeling? I asked softly. Better. The doctors say I'll be as good as new. He looked at me and added, thank you for being there. I sat across from him. The city buzzed outside the window. In the quiet of the room, we both knew the talk wouldn't be easy. Mi Rae, he began, you know I didn't kill them. I never intended to defend true monsters for money. I had a plan, to infiltrate their world, to gather proof of larger corruption. But now it will backfire. I fear I'll always be seen as the villain. I don't care what people call you, I said quietly, and he frowned. Really? Yes, I looked at him warmly. I've learned that truth is more complicated than it seems. You wanted to change the system from within. Maybe it looked contradictory, but now I understand the world isn't black and white. There are many shades. And I stood and came closer. He reached for me with his good arm, pulling me against his chest. I whispered, I just want to be with you. If you don't mind. I want that too, he said, embracing me. But it won't be easy. Your dream of becoming a judge, my work as a lawyer despised by the prosecution. We'll manage, I answered, believing it with all my heart. We sat together in silence, savoring the peace and closeness. Ahead lay challenges. I would pursue my career, maybe one day become a judge. He would continue defending those deemed bad. But now I knew his cynicism masked pain, and the desire to strike at the root of evil. I could no longer see him as an enemy. Later that night I left. At the door, he pulled me close for a brief, tender kiss. Take care of yourself, he said, gently touching my cheek. You too, I replied, warmth blooming inside me. Outside, the cool Seoul night washed over me. I looked up at the sky full of lights. Once, I believed everything was simple, good people, bad people, justice either present or absent. Now I understood, the world is complex. Even righteous fighters can become killers, and the devil's advocate can save lives and fight to uproot crime. And perhaps the most important lesson, true justice is in not losing one's humanity and compassion. That's why I decided to keep moving toward my dream of becoming a judge, but now without illusions of black and white. I wanted to judge not only by the letter of the law, but also with heart, without losing objectivity or mercy. As for Lee Do Hyun, he remained the man I loved. Maybe for some, our bond would be unacceptable, strange. But I no longer cared what others thought. We had no guarantee of happily ever after, but we had the certainty that each of us would take responsibility for the other. This story tested my faith in the law, my moral principles, my heart. And though the path was filled with pain, fear, lies, even blood, I had no regrets. For it was then that I gained true faith, and complex, ambiguous, yet precious justice. And perhaps one day I'll bring it into my verdicts, protecting those who deserve a second chance, punishing those who dare take justice into their own hands. I don't think this story has a final ending. Life goes on. What happens with Lee Do Hyun and me depends on more than just us. But I know one thing, I'll never again be the naive girl who believed in the purity of the law. I've become someone else, someone who can see the world in all its complexity. And if I'm ever asked if I regret anything, I'll answer, no. Because only by going through all this did I learn how to truly fight for justice.